Taylor Swift is an artist who, 2 years ago, I never actively sought out. I was well aware of her and had friends who listened to her, but I almost made it a mission to avoid her music. Last year, I decided to give her stuff a listen, one thing led to another, and now I'm here to rank all of her songs. This ranking will be covering 237 songs spanning 18 years of her career, including all the songs on her official albums, her singles, and songs she is featured on. I will not be ranking the same song twice, such as remixes, alternative edits, or ranking Taylor's version separate from the original, unless there is a big enough difference. Without further ado, let's start with what, in my opinion, is Taylor's worst song.
But at least you have beautiful ghosts.
Sometimes soundtrack songs work outside of the movies. Beautiful Ghosts does not. It only works from the perspective of Victoria, probably because it's Taylor taking a jab at musical theatre. She does a decent job vocally, but the writing being exclusively valuable to Cats, her writing and singing in a British accent, and the over-the-top production doesn't make this very good. It's at least better than the performance in the movie. It's also just way too long, and it's a pretty boring song.
Check it once, then I check it twice. Oh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me.
Look What You Made Me Do is a really annoying track that has basically no redeeming qualities. But the bridge is pretty good, but that interlude. It may not be her worst song, in my opinion, but it probably is.
They say I did something bad, and why's it feel so good? They say I did something bad, and why's it feel so good? Most fun I ever had.
I really don't like the snare and gunshot sounds in the track. Like, it's trying to be this big, epic and edgy song, but I just don't think it works. There's really no reason to listen to it. Me gets much deserved hate from the Swifties. You think it might get good, or even it is good, and then Brendan Urie comes in with a spoken word piece, and you remember it features Panic at the Disco and All of the Joy Leaves Your Body. It could be fine, but it's not good to listen to, man. It's not any fun.
Take my time. Are you ready for it?
Ready For It is an overly produced track that has always sounded dated. It is amusing that she tries to do some different things, being more hip-hop and trap here than on her other albums. But again, with a lot of reputation, it just doesn't work. This is a massively abridged cover of the Jackson 5 song, and I'm just wondering why. It's a minute 20, with that 20 seconds being just an intro, and it's just the chorus twice. Sure, I guess it's pretty novel to hear Taylor sing Michael Jackson, but it's just a pointless song.
Is your text about to bounce?
What I do have to say about Karma, I will say later, but taking it and adding a pretty bad Ice Spice verse with wonky delivery and bad metaphors just pushes it even further down for me.
Unlocking the gates. This is why we can't have nice things, darling.
This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things is a pretty bad song. It reminds me of Lorde in the beginning, but the rest of the track just feels like a wonky musical theatre song that just goes to some weird places.
Spin me around, you make me crazier, crazier.
The guitars really jump out to me as bad here, but it's just a 2009 Taylor song that's harkening back to more of the 2006 sound. It's pretty unremarkable, and there really isn't a reason to go back to it.
Watched me run along so I
probably my more controversial opinion, but I just think that You Belong With Me is painfully overproduced. And there's just this whole whiny attitude throughout about how this dude's girlfriend is way worse than Taylor is and she's so much cooler and better. It's the epitome of a pick-me anthem, and it has some pretty toxic views on relationships and crushes. I think it's pretty emblematic of reasons why people don't like Taylor who haven't listened to her other songs. Two is Better Than One is a strange emo country track that I just don't get. Like, it's a very specific and dated time period that weakens Taylor's catalogue as is. So to get this generic boy band track, which he does backing vocals you can barely hear, is just annoying. It's sad when Taylor gets underutilized as a feature, where she's just relegated to a female backing vocal.
What can I say?
Gorgeous has a confusing and unnecessary plot with annoying and dumb writing and production. It's not the best message of thirsting over a dude who is in a relationship. Even if it ends with her avoiding him, it's still not a good thing to celebrate. It also just doesn't sound good.
What is happening to me? I don't wanna live forever.
I Don't Wanna Live Forever just sounds like a 1989 leftover. Zayn is lifeless, Taylor isn't really on her A game, and the sound is just incredibly generic and artificial. The whole thing just sounds pretty soulless.
She's got Betty Davis eyes.
This is a live cover of Kim Carner's... Is it Kim Carner's? Nobody knows how to pronounce it. It's not... it. Okay, Google. Kim Carnes. Okay. This is a live cover of Kim Carnes' song. It's honestly the weaker version of the track, that I don't really think worked with Taylor's soft and smooth voice in the acoustic performance. The original song has the synthy 80s production and Kim's gravelly voice that really just gives a texture to it. It just doesn't really work. I get why she sung it, but it's just inferior to the original.
High infidelity, put on your records and regret me.
High Infidelity is a boring instrumental, boring story she's done better elsewhere, and doesn't really have a purpose to exist. It's just a Midnight's bonus track that doesn't even need to be on the album at all.
Santa baby, slip a sable under the tree for me.
It's Santa Baby.
Be counterfeit. I think there's been a glitch.
Glitch really isn't anything. It's inoffensive, but it's entirely forgettable and really underwhelming.
Not one, but both of us.
Both of Us is a goofy B.O.B. rap song with some bad lyrics and really overproduced sound to it. But, since this is a Taylor ranking, I will say her chorus is uplifting and nice, even if it's underutilizing her talents to a hook like what Eminem did with Pink and Rihanna.
And I'll bet you thought you beat me. Wish you could only see I got an I question mark written on the back of my hand.
I Heart ? Is an insanely country song, and I don't really like country. The incessant banjo really turns me off, and it isn't that good to come back to. I mean, no wonder it doesn't have an official release. Sweeter Than Fiction is all over the place. It definitely feels like there's a tug between the genuine vocals of Red Taylor and the overproduction of 1989 Taylor. Beautiful Eyes doesn't have the best vocal performance from Taylor, and it's pretty easy to dismiss, as it doesn't really have a reason to exist. It basically just feels like a fearless leftover.
That is nice to believe when you think Timber Girl. I hope you think my favorite song.
As Taylor's first song on her first album, it's not a very good start. It has generic writing and the story is very surface level, and it's all tied together with pretty underwhelming country production. Bad Blood doesn't work. And annoying lyrics. The chorus is particular with weird writing and where the instrumentals cut back to just being the drums, and it just sounds so try-hard. Filler tracks that are well known and give her a bad reputation. Superman just has a pretty cheesy premise, and it's not saved by good writing or production. Just a bit of a letdown. If This Was a Movie is a pretty standard Fearless track, but I get why it was left off of Taylor's version because it's really unremarkable and doesn't need to be on the actual album. New Romantics has good lyrics, but I don't think it's executed very well. The production is pretty generic and underwhelming, and the ad-libs are annoying and it just doesn't go anywhere. Electric Touch is one of those songs where you try to guess what the title means, and you're waiting for it to appear in the song, and when it is, it's in one of the most forced lines in the track. Aside from that, it's not so great. The Fall Out Boy feature is pretty bland and it's just pretty forgettable. Endgame isn't as bad as I first thought it was, but I still believe that Taylor is the weakest component of the track, and I'm not really a fan of Future or Ed Sheeran, so that's saying a lot. So here's the original version of Karma. It has some pretty bad lyrics on the track and it's just pretty nonsensical. It's a vibe and I get it, but it's just not a song that I come back to. The pop version of Teardrops on My Guitar is the weakest version of the song. It removes any of the charm and nuance of the original track with the country sound, with this new and really dated pop sound. Call It What You Want is this really random use of trap and hi-hat production. It could be a leftover from Lover, but it doesn't really do anything necessarily bad, I guess. I just don't have any reason to like it.
God, I love the English. You know I love a London boy. I enjoy nights in Brixton.
London Boy is a corny track that uses a lot of stereotypes of British people, and it just gets annoying. It's not that strong of a through line, and it's just a gimmicky track. I don't care. The Way I Loved You is pretty by the numbers and generic. It's pretty forgettable. It has this weird story about how she wishes she could argue with her boyfriend instead of him just being a good boyfriend. I don't know, it's pretty weird.
I can't live without you, I can't live without you, baby. Oh, baby.
Highway don't care.
Highway Don't Care. It's a fine country song. I'm not going to dock a points just because I don't like country. It's decent and Taylor's used well, but I don't think that Tim McGraw's vocals sound that good. They sound kind of overproduced and fake. I don't really care for it. King of My Heart's kind of a mess. The production's doing its own thing while Taylor's doing her own thing as well. It just doesn't really blend well, and it has a pretty bad bridge.
cheap wine, make believe it's champagne. I was taken by the view like we were in Paris.
Paris is boring, doesn't really go anywhere, it doesn't really have anything that grabs me. Another Midnight's bonus track just goes one ear, out the other.
Paris, we were saying goodbye is death by 1,000 cuts. Flashbacks waking me up.
Death by 1,000 Cuts is sickeningly sweet, and it has this really atrociously over-the-top lovey-dovey writing, and the piano is also insanely annoying. But it is a cute track, and it has its purpose.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know.
It's White Christmas.
Treetops glisten and children. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. You were bigger than the whole sky. You were
The chorus of Bigger Than the Whole Sky reminds me of Babe. Overall, it's just a slow song, it's kind of boring, it doesn't really go anywhere. Like a lot of Midnight's bonus tracks, just saying.
gonna be. What could have been, would have been. What should have been you.
I get myself twisted in threads to meet you at the Alcott.
The Alcott's kind of underwhelming. I already thought that Matt's vocals weren't the best alone, and they worked best when they were just backing behind Taylor. So getting the reverse of that, with Taylor doing the backing vocals to Matt, who has this cracking voice, it just doesn't fit my taste.
They say she's gone too far this time. Don't make me love, make me crazy. If it doesn't, you ain't doing it right.
Don't Blame Me is one of the better tracks on Reputation, and that hardcore edge that she tries to implement on the Reputation songs, she does here, mostly successfully, but it's overall kind of mundane and dull.
Pretended it could last forever. We found Wonderland. You and I got lost in it.
Wonderland's a pretty throwaway track. Isn't really that interesting. Sounds fine. Don't really care.
All I used to do was pray. Would've, could've, should've. If you'd never looked my way.
Would've, could've, should've tries with interesting production and vocal delivery, which is more than you can say about a lot of the bonus tracks, but it is pretty forgettable and boring. A lot of these songs are this low on the ranking because I can't remember anything about them. I just listen to them and they just don't have any qualities that I can remember.
I wish you left me wondering if you never touched in front of you, saying I'm sorry for that night. And I go back to December all the time.
As with Would've, Could've, Should've, Back to December is also just forgettable. It's a Speak Now song, so it's still well produced and well performed. It's just nothing. It doesn't really leave any impact.
I say nothing, I was just thinking how we don't have a song. And he says, our song is a slam and scream door, sneaking alley, tapping on your window.
Our song is so aggressively country, but it is sweet and cheesy. It's not horrible, but it's not my favorite, even from the debut album.
And when I got home, for I said amen. Sure, Christmas must be something more.
Christmas Must Be Something More is a fine original Christmas song, but it's still just a Christmas song.
What if angels did not pay attention to all the things that we... Today was a fairy tale, you were the prince.
Today Was a Fairy Tale has a boring metaphor, Our Date Was a Fairy Tale, but it's just a mindless love song. It's listenable, but it just kind of melts into the background. It's Last Christmas.
It's on me, just don't go. Maybe in the afterglow.
Afterglow is just a generic love song, doesn't really have any of Taylor's trademarks. The writing and sound of it feels much more akin to an Ariana Grande track than a Taylor track. I think maybe because it's pretty impersonal in general, and it doesn't really feel like something that she would write.
We were cursed. We never had a shotgun shot in the dark. You were driving the getaway car. We were flying, but we never get far.
Getaway Car definitely feels like a 1989 leftover track that has some pretty wonky vocals but decent production. It's one of the fan favorites from Reputation. It's fine, but I just don't really get the hype around it.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm and all
It's Silent Night.
bright.
Are you getting bored of these Christmas songs? Because I'm getting bored of them.
As far as I'm concerned, you're just another picture to burn.
Picture to Burn is the most emphatic country song on the debut album, down to random homophobia.
Go and tell your friends that I'm obsessive and crazy. That's fine. I'll tell mine you're gay.
But it does have an energy to it that I can't deny. I just don't want to listen to it again. Also, that banjo.
Take away the pain, 'cause I see sparks fly whenever you smile.
Sparks Fly is a pretty by-the-numbers pop country track that, similar to Today Was a Fairy Tale, just kind of blends into the background.
I guess I don't have a say. Now that we don't talk.
Now That We Don't Talk is a weird and underbaked track that is just so short and has no purpose. Kind of feels like it was just put onto Taylor's version to increase the track number.
No, sleeping intense. It's nice to have a friend.
It's Nice to Have a Friend is a song I wish I could say I like more than I do. The flow from Taylor is interesting, the production is simple but interesting, the backing vocal hums are also pretty interesting, but it only lasts 2.5 minutes and has the same energy at the start as it does at the end. It's just a very underbaked track that has so much potential but just squanders it.
Yeah, me too. Something gave you the stakes are high, the water's rough, but this love is ours.
I like the line about throwing stones, but otherwise Ours is a song that doesn't really do anything for me. It's not bad, that line's good, but it's just nothing.
People have up their sleeves. And I said, stay, stay, stay.
Stay, Stay, Stay is a song that has actually worsened upon re-listens for me, mainly because the song almost trivializes a toxic relationship. Taylor also doesn't really perform childishly that well, and while the original does do it better than Taylor's version, it just kinda gets repetitive.
Before you, I'd only date. Is it chill that you're in my head? 'Cause I know that it's delicate.
Delicate is a fine track. It doesn't really fit the rest of Reputation aside from the references to the album title, but it just doesn't have the same sticking power as some of our other songs.
But then something happened one magical night. I forgot that you existed.
I Forgot That You Existed has a good and fun sentiment, but has pretty underwhelming production, and similar to It's Nice to Have a Friend, it doesn't really go anywhere.
So peaceful and quiet. You put your arm around me for the first time. You made a rebel of a careless man's careful daughter. You are the best thing that's ever been mine.
The part where she sings For the First Time always gets me, but the rest of mine just kind of blends into the background as an opening track to Speak Now.
My things at your place and rolled their eyes and said,
Mary's song is fine and cutesy, but it's forgettable and boring. It's not bad, I just don't really care about it. Dress is a very sensual track that is very bizarre to hear from Taylor. I mean, it's fine, but it just isn't my type of song, especially from Taylor. That's When has a boring feature. It's pretty boring overall. It's a well-made song. I just don't care. A lot of these songs, they're well made. I just don't really attach to them. Same goes for Haunted. Forgettable and boring, even if it's well made. Daylight has a boring extended metaphor. I don't really care about it, and it's just a pretty generic love song. It definitely feels like a song added onto Lover to extend the track listing, make it even more bloated than it already was. Speak Now is a weird pop song about disrupting a wedding. It's fine, about on the same level as every other song from Speak Now. Gestures are exchanged, and the organ starts to play a song. Bye Bye Baby. It's kind of forgettable and underwhelming. Maroon has one of the blandest productions and vibes of Midnight, and it's just pretty boring. The Maroon and Scarlet lines are cheeky and fun, and some of the writing is good, but that's really all that it has going for it. It's not terribly made, it's just very generic, and it really has some out of place profanity in it. It doesn't really fit. That's the kind of heartbreak time could never mend. I never walk Cornelia Street again. And baby, Cornelia Street is a fine track, but it just doesn't do anything that Taylor hasn't done elsewhere better. The story of wanting to avoid an area due to memories she has there with an ex isn't really that engaging or unique of a concept. You should have said no, you should have gone home, you should have thought twice before you let it all go. Should Have Said No is a good track, but it's really weakened by the country elements of it. I like the ending a lot, and the loudness of the rock instrumentation really works, but I think the country twang and the repetitiveness of it is kinda grating. Outside they push and shoving, you're in the kitchen humming. All that you ever wanted from me was sweet nothing. Sweet Nothing is a nice little lullaby track, and I do like the melody of it, but it's just kind of devoid and empty, and it doesn't really go anywhere besides just sounding like a pleasant track. It has a niche and it serves it, but it's just not one I come back to. Go there every night. I think he knows his hands around her.
cold glass.
I Think He Knows gives me strong Midnight vibes, but Taylor on the chorus is a bit grating, the production is unremarkable, and being under 3 minutes, it also feels kind of underbaked. It's a basic song, but I do admit it's kind of cute. I don't really care for the other side of the door. Guitar solos, cliche writing, and just an intense and overwhelming sound doesn't really fit my tastes. It's still a fearless love song and it's inoffensive, it's just a bit too much for me.
Why would you wanna break a perfectly good heart?
A Perfectly Good Heart is probably the least country track on the debut, but it does end up being pretty repetitive and generic, even if I do like it more than some of the more country-influenced songs.
Should've read the writing on the wall. Sweet dream was over my hand, was the one you reached for, all throughout the Great War.
The Great War has interesting framing that a lot could be done with, but it doesn't really do much with the theme of love being war.
You drew up some good faith treaties. Looking like coming home. Oh, I know it's a simple name. Everything has changed.
Everything Has Changed sounds like a track from Multiply by Ed Sheeran, and as that it is fine, but I don't really think it's that great of a track overall, especially being a Taylor song.
Has changed.
Paper Rings is an overly saccharine track that doesn't really do much for me, but I do have to say that's just because it isn't my taste. It's fine, I just don't really care.
Still love my life, I got money and vibe, and you gotta live with the bad blood now.
The remix is better than the original track, as a lot of the empty space of the original is filled by Kendrick, and the production is ever so slightly altered for the better, but it's still not great.
Well, now he's back in the atmosphere. The job's a Jupiter in his head.
A live cover of Train's song. It's Drops of Jupiter sung by Taylor. It's the superior version.
This time, but only the young, only the young.
Only the Young is a loud and exciting track, but the lyrics don't really match with that vibe. It has a sad story of how the young will succeed past the previous generations. It's a good message, but I just think it's not executed that well, with the generic pop anthem music not matching the mature and serious subject matter of her writing.
So every day now you brace for the sound you've only heard on Superstar.
Superstar is an okay track from Fearless. It's repetitive and unnecessary, especially since it was a bonus song, but I don't think it's that horrible, it's just a bit forgettable.
Morning loneliness. I shake it off. Shake it off. I shake it off. I shake it off. I shake it off.
Shake It Off is an admirable track that gets more hate than it deserves. It's made fun of, for obviously tongue-in-cheek comments made about her that she's reusing. It's an earworm and it has a positive message, but that bridge does make me wonder if I actually do like the track, because, eesh.
Love is a lie. Shit my friends say to get me by. It hits different. It hits different this time.
Hits Different is a higher energy for a Midnight's track, and for that it has some merit, but I don't really remember anything about it after just listening to it.
Do you remember the 28th night of September.
This is a slower paced acoustic cover of September by Earth, Wind & Fire. It has a very different vibe from the original, which actually makes it a worthwhile song to listen to. It reminds me of something off of Fearless, but with a modern twist. It's good.
The key that our souls were singing as we Hey Stephen, I know looks can be deceiving, but I know I saw a light in you.
Hey Stephen is a bit of a generic and boring pop track that has some more country twang that's necessary. There's just nothing really makes the song stand out aside from that Angel line.
You see the best in me, the Joker and the Queen.
The Joker and the Queen is one of the few tracks on Equal that I didn't hate, but it's still kind of pretentious and over the top. However, the soft duet between Taylor and Ed is nice, and they do make good songs together when they try.
But you call and you have to. Dear reader, you don't have to answer just cause they asked you.
Dear Reader has some pretty egregious pitch correction, but I do like how it's one of the few bonus tracks of Midnights that still fits with the same vibe. It's still pretty unnecessary, but it warrants its existence more than other bonus tracks for the album.
Make sure you don't miss. Know that what I feel is true, and I'm only me when I'm with you.
I'm Only Me When I'm With You is not a very country song, it's more of rock influence for it. But I'm not sure how well that works. It has a decent energy and tone to it, but I don't think it's very well balanced.
Trying to figure out what you could take it. I had a bad feeling, but we were dancing with our hands tied, hands tied.
Dancing With Our Hands Tied is one of Reputation's stronger songs, with a better grasp on the production style of the album and more catchiness than the other tracks have. But like the rest of this era, it just really lacks any substance.
My heart is a Christmas tree farm where the people would come.
Christmas Tree Farm is a pretty decent modern Christmas song. It does feel both traditional and contemporary, but it's still a Christmas song I'll never listen to outside of the holidays.
Dreams of holly and ribbon, mistakes are forgiven, and everything is icing you back. Now that it's just too late, well, could have been easy. All you had to do was
All You Had to Do Was Stay is a pretty conventional pop track, and it's pretty repetitive, but I get why people would like it. It just doesn't do anything for me particularly.
here you are now, calling me up, but I don't know. Lonely time, 'cause there were Christmases when you were mine.
Christmas Is When You Were Mine is an original Christmas song from early in Taylor's career. It's pretty impressive. It's good because it could almost be used on occasions outside of Christmas. Almost.
Got your mom another sweater, and were your cousins? You know I'm not a bad girl, but I do bad things with you. So it goes.
So It Goes is a pretty memorable chorus, but otherwise it's as lackluster and boring as the rest of Reputation. I don't care for the bridge, and the end is very abrupt.
You did like me in the night. Now your silence has me screaming, screaming. Say don't go. I would stay forever.
Say Don't Go is pretty much a filler track. It's forgettable and unremarkable, even if it is made well.
Now I'm pacing on shaky. So even in a different life, you still would have been mine. We would have been timeless.
Timeless has a cute concept, but I don't really think it utilizes it to its full potential. You Are In Love has a nice sound to it, like the most of 1989 does, but it doesn't really set itself apart from other similar tracks to it.
It's not where you've been. You're still an innocent.
Innocent is nice, but it's somewhat vague, and it tries to be a really reassuring track, even though it doesn't quite hit the mark.
Sign for you. Whoa, I'm feeling you, baby. Don't be afraid to jump, then fall into me.
Jump Then Fall is a well-produced track with a good chorus, but is otherwise a pretty standard romance song. Message in a Bottle is a very 2012 sounding song, particularly the house production and simplicity. It gets pretty repetitive and forgettable, but it isn't that bad. Gasoline is a decent alt-rock track that has a good groove to it, and I think Taylor and Hayden are good together. It not really being a Taylor song, and it also being a good, not great track, is why it's this low.
And that's how it works. That's how you get the girl.
How You Get the Girl has a nice chorus, but the electro production is a bit over the top for me and just becomes noise.
Just a girl trying to find a place in this world.
A Place in This World has a decent vibe to it, but it isn't the greatest song on the album. It's better than other tracks on the debut, but it just sits in the middle of quality, in my opinion.
Wearing my heart on my sleeve, feeling lucky today. Oh, baby, was it over then? And is it over now?
Is It Over Now is a fine track. It's well made, but ultimately I just forget about it as soon as I stop listening to it. Come In With the Rain has a funky country influence on an otherwise rock song. It's pretty fun, but like a lot of feelers, it just kind of repeats the same points of other tracks on the album. The Story of Us has a cute structure, but it's a pretty generic story. So the whole theme of it being a tragedy doesn't really hit when it's just so generic and broad of a concept. This Love is a more traditional track from 1989. It sounds more like something before the Red era, though it's not particularly revolutionary.
And all you're ever gonna be is mean.
Mean works as a song to yell in the mirror when you're being bullied, but I think it's too broad to be anything more than that. Sure, she does nod to some real-life occasions with other people being mean to her, but my point still stands.
Be so mean. Come here to make friends. We were born to be suburban legends when you hold me in.
Suburban Legends is a decent addition, but unnecessary for 1989 as it stands. It's pretty much filler, but it isn't bad filler, it's just unremarkable.
For innocence, I'm on my vigilante shit again.
I get the hate the song receives, but to dislike a song because you can tell it was inspired by other artists means you have to dislike basically every song. It's fun and it's edgy, and it does both of those things better than basically anything on Reputation. I think it's fine.
Just for friends, lately I've been dressing for a and I know that you see what you're doing to me. Tell me why.
Tell Me Why is a fine song. Really weird with the beatboxing in the background, but otherwise it's like most of the rest of Fearless. Decent, if a tad forgettable.
She should keep in mind there is nothing I do better than revenge.
Better Than Revenge is a bizarre punk pop track that is fine, but I don't really think it fits her catalogue. It's good by itself, but listening to all of these Taylor songs and then this, it just feels kinda out of place.
I think her ever-present frown is a little troubling. List of its lovers, they'll tell you I'm insane, but I got a blank space, baby.
Blank Space is pretty repetitive and predictable, and it's just kind of annoying and doesn't really go anywhere. It does sound good though, which I think makes it kind of disappointing that it doesn't really try that hard.
All that I can say is all of the girls you loved before.
I don't understand why All the Girls You Loved Before was snubbed from Lover, because the melodies are more memorable than some of the actual album's tracks, and it tries a lot more than a lot of the rest of the album does. It does have kind of an abrupt ending though, which makes it feel like it's unfinished. Lavender Haze is one of the first songs that comes to mind when I think of Midnights, and it's funny because it's a good encapsulation of the album. It has a very strong vibe and a very interesting production and vocal range, but it doesn't really have much to say. It has unnecessary swearing, and it's just a vague love song. It's basically a 1989 track, but with more interesting production.
Untouchable like a distant diamond sky.
Untouchable is an alright love song, but I think it's a bit too long. It doesn't really warrant the over 5-minute long runtime, and it just ends up repeating the chorus instead of adding anything new to the story that would justify its length. It's not bad, but again, it's long, and it is pretty simple. I don't really like when songs are based off of colours. I find it cheesy and overplayed. Red is charming, as is most of the rest of the Red album. I just think it's one of the most mid songs on the album.
You're the only thing I know, like the back of my hand, and I can't breathe without you.
Breathe is a nice track that has a nice meaning behind it, and has a strong through line to it, but it's pretty simple.
'Cause he was nice, he was sunshine, I was midnight.
I like the vocal effects on Midnight Rain. It really makes the song memorable, but really the chorus is the only thing that comes to mind. It's not bad by any means. The chorus is just the only part that I can really remember about this track.
Picture perfect, shiny family, holiday, peppermint candy. I think about it now. He's the reason for the teardrops on my guitar.
The radio edit of Teardrops on My Guitar is one of the few debut tracks I can't really imagine without the country effect on it. With the slow pacing and the comfy feeling of it, I think it all works together. And that's why the pop version is so much lower on my ranking than this one is.
When Emma falls in love, she paces the floor.
When Emma Falls in Love creates a pretty clear image of Emma, and it's an interesting track, but because it's more of a narrative and story-driven song, it doesn't really have that much of re-listenability to it.
About the ways that this one could go wrong. I laid the groundwork and then, just like clockwork, the dominoes cascaded in a line. What if I told you I'm a mastermind?
I like the connection between Taylor and the production. It has this movement to it that I really like. It's funny that she says that she's the mastermind behind everything, because a lot of people try to say that she is, both ironically and unironically. However, like a lot of Midnights, it doesn't really do much beyond capture a very specific and interesting vibe. Especially as a final track, it doesn't really add much to conclude the album.
Born to be the pawn in every love. Hope you know that every time I don't, I almost do.
I Almost Do has an interesting concept that I myself find relatable, but for a song on Red, it doesn't really stand out.
Baby, like I did before, you're not sorry.
I like the orchestral soundscape that You're Not Sorry has, and it's got a nice sway to it, but it's pretty simple.
By the way, I just may like some explanations. Can I ask you a question?
Question is a cutesy little song of Taylor asking her ex if he misses her, but it doesn't really try to do much besides that, so it's a bit of a letdown. It's somewhat forgettable overall.
They were clapping too. Then what did you do? We'll never learn your lesson. Foolish one, stop checking your mailbox.
Foolish One is a nice track about how Taylor is such a hopeless romantic who needs to be realistic, but it doesn't really have much more to it. But it doesn't really have much more than that to say.
Let me down. Now it's too late for you and your white horse to come around.
White Horse is a good song, but it's not that memorable. It's a nice and sad story, it's reflective of a lot of Fearless, but it just doesn't really jump out.
Our eyes never really had a chance. Feels impossible, but it's coming down. No sound, it's all around like snow on the beach.
Snow on the Beach has a decent soundscape, and I like the vibe that it has, but it has one of the strangest features on it. As for the more Lana version, everything that I say about the original still stands, because all that it does is it adds a verse from Lana, but her vocals sound pretty unpolished and unfinished. And maybe that's why the actual album released with a version she was just backing vocals on. Either way, I think the more Lana version is slightly weaker due to the downgrade in quality on her vocals, as opposed to having vocals relegated to just the background. Castles Crumbling has cool production throughout, but it has an unnecessary feature. It's not a bad song, but it's just not great.
The very first night, and so it goes.
The Very First Night is a very seductive and implicative track, but it's a bit too simple and pop sounding for my taste.
Oh, but if it don't, stay beautiful.
Stay Beautiful has one of Taylor's best choruses in my opinion. It's a nice little song and it's good for the debut album. It has a nice message too.
Taking pictures in my mind so I can save them for a rainy alone. But it would have been fun if you would have been the one.
And now we finally have the first song on Folklore at number 106. I think that The One immediately sets the tone of Folklore, and I respect it for that. The more low-key production, the narrative and the vivid storytelling of it, and the maturity in her voice, and the production and the writing of it. However, it is the weakest song on the album, simply because it doesn't really tie into the strongest themes of the album as a whole, that the other tracks do so effortlessly.
He was trying to skip rocks on the ocean, saying to me, don't you see the starlight?
Starlight's a somewhat generic and boring track. The chorus is memorable, but it just kind of melts into the background like a lot of these simple love songs do.
ever go, and things that only Carolina will ever know.
Carolina has a folklore vibe to it that I like, but it's a bit too long and a bit forgettable and boring. Although, if I did hear it, I probably wouldn't say that it sounds like a song from a movie. So I guess she did that better than what she did with Cats.
Stains on the dress she wears. And we run, baby. I know places we won't be found in.
I Know Places has this weird mix of edgy Taylor with pretty normal pop Taylor. I get how it could be this rebellious track, but it's not really anything impressive.
I've never been anywhere cold as you.
Cold as You is a genuinely great Taylor song, downgraded by the country soundscape and the pitfalls of being on the debut, because it's a pretty well written and paced story.
Walls and paint them all a shade of gray. Want you to know I'm a mirror ball.
Mirror Ball is the only song on Folklore that I always skip. The slow pace, the production, and the story doesn't really capture me. It's a good song, no doubt, and it's not the worst on the album. I think the mirror ball metaphor doesn't really work aside from the final verse.
Drunk as they watch my shattered edges glisten. Still see you dancing the best view on the outside, looking in.
The Outside has really good melodies and ideas, but it just has such generic country production that holds it back from truly being a great track.
You saw me or shrink to know that you'll never be happy, and I bet you think about me.
I Bet You Think About Me is a more scathing song against Jake than even All Too Well, and it's cool to hear a more country influenced song on Red, especially a Volt track, and it works with that sound. It's good, if unnecessary.
Help me hold on to you. I've been the archer.
The Archer is an underrated track about Taylor examining herself and her relationships, admitting that she's been on both sides of the blame. It feels like a response to her previous songs like You Belong With Me and Most of Reputation, where she isn't this role model but actually praises some toxic behavior, and that she can also be toxic. It also just sounds pretty good.
I don't wanna miss you like this. Come back, be here. Come back, be here.
Come Back, Be Here is a simple love song about missing a lover when you're in different places. It's fine.
It's better than this. You'd take my hand, drag me head first, fearless.
Fearless has a good energy to it that starts the album off on a good note, but aside from doing that, it doesn't really do much else.
Sun for you forever, forever winter if you go.
Forever Winter sounds like a generic love song, but it's actually about Taylor's friend who died from a drug overdose. She laments about how she wishes she'd done more for her friend who was struggling, but he never showed it. It's a pretty sad track.
When the lights go out, it's hard to breathe. Flying, and I remember thinking, are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods?
I like the grand sound of Out of the Woods, and it's a really catchy track, but it is pretty basic and lackluster.
Best believe I'm still bejeweled when I walk in the room.
Bejeweled has some pretty wonky lines that I don't think do very well, and the extended metaphor isn't as gripping as it could be, but it does have an energy and a vibe to it that I like, and the production is pretty fun.
In the basement when I want the penthouse.
Miss Americana and The Heartbreak Prince are some of the best ad-libs in Taylor's discography, and the production is pretty decent, and the story is well-rounded and well-expressed. It's just a bit forgettable and generic to really make an impact.
I'd be the golden one, and you're tied together with a smile, but you're coming on.
Tied Together with a Smile is a heartfelt track about someone who keeps up appearances despite feeling terrible and hopeless. It has good themes and it's executed well.
We hadn't heard before, and it said welcome to New York.
Welcome to New York was the first song that really didn't sound like anything Taylor had made before it. But it is weirdly paced with this low-key intro leading into crescendo that really just maintains that energy for the rest of the track. It feels less like a song and more of just music, which I guess is fine, it's just more style over substance.
'Cause shade never made anybody less gay, so you need to calm down.
You Need to Calm Down is a cute song like Shake It Off, not really making fun of what people say, but disingenuously trying to tell those who don't like her to calm down. I appreciate its work as being an ally song, but I feel its brevity does a disservice to it, as it doesn't go as far into the hate she gets, or about internet misogyny over celebrities. But it's a pop song, so I shouldn't expect that from it. It does a decent job of what it's trying to do, and it is catchy.
You need to calm down. Away. How could you do this, babe?
Babe is a deceptively happy song, mostly due to the production, masking the story of Taylor breaking up with her boyfriend after he cheats on her. It's weird because you get this triumphant instrumental over a song about infidelity and crying on the kitchen floor. I don't think it's a very balanced track.
Keep score. Keep your eyes open. Everybody's waiting.
Eyes Open is a pretty fun rock song from Red that is nice, if a bit nothing, with it being pretty repetitive and lacking any real substance. It is a good time though, and it is fun to listen to.
Miracle, unbelievable. Said I'm just invisible.
Invisible has pretty good production and writing. There's a lot to improve on, but it's a good track, and it really shows that even from her first album, she was doing some pretty high concept love songs.
Take it with you and run.
Taylor's singing is really good, and Ed does harmonies nicely, but his verse is pretty nothing. The pre-chorus and chorus are genuinely great, but it's merely a good track with good parts, but doesn't really leave me thinking about it. And I do think it outstays its welcome a bit too much.
Hey Dorothea, do you ever stop and think about me?
Dorothea is the weakest song on Evermore, but it's still great. It has this softer and lighter tone than a lot of the rest of the album, which I think brings it down a tad. But there's a nice jolt of energy between Happiness and Coney Island. The Moment I Knew has pretty good verses, but the exaggerated production and pretty obnoxious chorus is pretty bland. It's a shame because it's otherwise a really tragic and well-written track about the partner being a no-show at her birthday and knowing then that she didn't love him anymore.
And the hours pass by. Now I just wanna be alone, but strange rumors fly through new skies, but I'm right where you left me.
Right Where You Left Me is a well-structured tale about being left behind in a relationship and feeling stuck in time and delusion. I think it's good, but the sound of the song does it a disservice and really undervalues what could be an otherwise great track.
Help, freedom gets you clean. I've still got you all over me.
You All Over Me is decent, if a bit forgettable. It's well produced and well written, but falls into the same category as a lot of the album, and so it just kind of repeats the same stuff the rest of it does. It's still good, I still like it, but it doesn't really stand out.
This is a state of grace.
This is a slightly worse version of the original State of Grace, but it's still pretty good. Everything I say about the original, which will be coming up later, still stands, but the acoustic production does make it a bit worse of an opener to Red, as it doesn't really capture the soundscape that the album has.
You're my Achilles. They might as well be looking at us. And if they call me a slut, you know it might be worth it for once.
This is a pretty empowering song, as it's taking the negative moniker applied to her and embracing it. It's done over a Midnight-style instrumental, and it sounds nice, but I don't think it goes that far into the themes as it could, and because of that I'm sad to say it falls a bit flat for me.
'Cause I was there when you said forever and always. You didn't mean it, baby.
Forever and Always is a really, really good love song that is ruined by this pop and upbeat production that reduces the impact the track could have otherwise.
We come back every time 'cause we never go out of style. We never go out of style.
Style is able to capture the 80s sound that apparently the rest of 1989 also tries to do, but I don't really think the whole song is that cohesive. I still really like it, it's still great to listen to, I just don't think it's that polished.
This slope is treacherous. This path is.
Treacherous is a softer song that does get a bit dull, but it sounds really nice, and it is a good change of pace for Red.
I never thought we'd ever last. Kiss.
Last Kiss is a vivid track. The way that Taylor is able to use words to create such broad situations that feel personal and intimate that impresses me. Cruel Summer is a decent synthy pop track, but it's kind of crazy how big it got recently. Though, considering it did get big for the same reasons that the 1989 songs were so big, being it's a short and inoffensive love song that's catchy and digestible, it kind of makes sense. It's a good song, but not one that I come back to too often.
Someday, and we were happy.
We Were Happy is a contemplative track, and it's well made and it sounds great, but it's pretty standard.
You would have been the one if you were a better man.
Better Man is a sad track about Taylor really loving this guy, but knowing that she's better off alone than living with someone who is not a good person. I'm sure it's very relatable to a lot of people, which I think is always when Taylor's at her best.
Wish you knew that I'd never forget you as long as I live. Wish you were right here, right now. It's all good. I wish you would.
I really love the groove of I Wish You Would, particularly the chorus. The guitar is a bit wonky, but otherwise has pretty great production. And while the story is simplistic, I think the sound of the track outweighs the lack of nuance.
Card game bets with Dolly, and they said, there goes the last great American dynasty.
The Last Great American Dynasty is the most interesting song about a house. It has this cyclical story of a man's life supposedly ruined by a woman who entered it, destroying his legacy, and then the whole thing repeating when Taylor buys the house and people blaming her for everything that goes wrong. I get that it being such a narratively strong track, it doesn't have that much replayability, but I still think it's very well made and it has a very good story to tell. I Can See You is a very forthright track from a usually private artist. It's evocative and the production is unique, especially for a Speak Now track.
Where we stood.
drums in Holy Ground are pretty memorable, and it's a nice track, but it doesn't really have the same substance that other songs on Red have.
I just pretend it isn't real. I'll paint the kitchen neon, I'll brighten up the sky. I know I'll never get it, there's not a day that I won't try. And I'll say to you, ooh, soon you'll get better. Ooh, soon you'll get better.
Soon You'll Get Better is a gut-wrenching song that reminds me of Ronan, but it's a lot more personal as it's actually Taylor's story she's singing about. I love the imagery and the vivid delivery, though it doesn't really make sense as a track on Lover, which I think does lose some of its staying power. It's a touching and heartfelt track on this bloated pop album.
What am I supposed to do if there's no you? Stranger, but I didn't pour the whiskey. I just wanted you to know that this is me trying.
This Is Me Trying is beautiful. From the reverb on Taylor's exasperated vocals to the depressing and toxic lyrics and the pulsating instrumental. Aside from that sphere line, it's dazzling front to back. Love Story is one of her most iconic tracks. It's a Romeo and Juliet analogue along with some other literary references. It's fun and quirky and memorable and completely sweet and touching.
Cursing my name, wishing I stayed. Look at how my tears ricochet.
My Tears Ricochet has some of the best lyrics on Folklore. It's really poetic and potent, and on the album it probably has the most folksy of a sound to it. It really sounds like a song that will be playing as you walk through a misty forest.
Time and time again. Life was a willow and it bent right to your wind.
Willow is an Evermore track that I don't love as much as the others, but it definitely has this twinkly, folksy sound from Evermore that allows us to move into the album. It introduces us as the first song, and even though it's not that great of a song by itself, as part of the album, it serves its purpose very well.
Even if it's just in your
Wildest Dreams sounds dreamy, and I really like that. I find it pretty charming. The sighs in the chorus really make me think of that cliche schoolgirl sighing about her crush. It gets across a vibe that works really well.
Because these things will change. Can you feel it now?
Change is a really triumphant track about Taylor rising to fame from such a small origin. Comparing her breaching the country sphere and coming into the mainstream as revolting is pretty empowering. And outside of a song about her success, it's just a feel-good anthem.
And we'll sing hallelujah. And yeah, I might go with it if I hadn't once been just like her. So don't look at me, you got a girl at home and everybody knows that.
Girl at Home is practically the same story as Gorgeous, but it's done in a way where Taylor is being the responsible person. She's conflicted on dating this guy already in a relationship, but feels empathy with his girlfriend and turns him down because of her. There is also a lot of texture to it, with it having these filters over her voice and depth to the instrumentals that makes it really fun to listen to.
You could call me babe for the weekend. 'Tis the damn season, write this down.
'Tis the Damn Season is a pretty stagnant track. It doesn't really change much from the beginning to the end, but it has a really nice story, really nice production, and really nice delivery from Taylor that I can't really put it any lower than where it is right now.
We could just ride a stairs. I was there, I remember it all too well.
Now hold on. I can explain. All Too Well is a pretty good track that is overshadowed by its superior 10-minute version. As is, I think it pushes too far into country that it feels like any other track from her first 3 albums, instead of the actual song it could have been, and it eventually does become.
And I fell from the pedestal right down the rabbit hole. Long story short, it was a bad time.
Long Story Short is another zesty track on Evermore that doesn't really catch me as much as the other songs do on the album, but it's still flawlessly produced with some cute and well-written lyrics like those other, better songs on the album.
Make you happy, but don't you?
Don't You is a soft, almost Midnights-like track that I like. It's a nice listen and it has good vibes. Lover is a nice slow dance song with good Taylor vocals with a slight reverb on her voice and the drums which make it feel like it's being sung in a ballroom or something. It's one of Lover's more textured tracks and it's pretty memorable for that. 15 is a reflective song about how Taylor decided to take her life in one direction despite her heart wanting to take it in a different direction, comparing herself to the character of Abigail who did follow her heart, and she got burned for it. It's a sad track about childhood innocence and love, and it works well. Long Live is one of the best written and sounding tracks on Speak Now. It's pretty poetic and symbolic, and I love Taylor singing on it.
This is the last time I'm asking you this.
I don't really ever care for starting a song with a feature, but on The Last Time, Lightbody does do a decent job. It has one of the more memorable choruses, and isn't a track that necessarily has aged poorly. It's a good early duet from Taylor.
Morning, gone was any trace of you. I think I am finally clean.
Clean has this funky electronic production and this soft vocal performance. It's a really nice listen and conclusive track for 1989. Also, you can perform CPR to its BPM, so that's pretty cool.
When the butterflies turn to in the trees, I hid my beak at 7 feet in the swing.
7 is a very sweet track that I don't quite think hits the nail on the head. It's interesting, Taylor reminiscing and showing love for a friend she has forgotten, and references to domestic violence and even homophobia, but I think the subtlety does downplay its potential effectiveness, and she could have got a lot further with this song.
What a sad, beautiful, tragic.
Sad, Beautiful, Tragic is a really nice slow-paced track that helps calm down from Red's more energetic tracks. It has a purpose, it serves it well.
Morning light, you and I'll be safe and sound.
Safe and Sound is a delicate and nice track with acoustic production, layered backing vocals, soft lyrics that almost mimic a lullaby. It's a cool and interesting track I'm sure doesn't get as much attention since it's only a single.
Be a reason your faithless love's the only hoax I believe in.
Hoax is a dark and depressing conclusion to Folklore. It's about this loveless relationship that Taylor yearns for, and although it causes a pain greater than she's ever had, she can't help herself.
Sadness in the You're a cowboy like me.
Cowboy Like Me is a weird song really, as it doesn't really match the title since there's almost no country influence on it. More so it has this folksy sound with the guitar specifically, but it's just a nice track to listen to and let it take you away. 22 has grown on me over more listens, and Taylor's version definitely made it more tolerable, and it has a vibe that it fits well. It's a good party song, especially for people turning 22, and for that, it's fine.
Gonna take to feel okay, but I know I had the best day with you today.
The Best Day is a reflective track about Taylor's family, particularly her mother, that is touching and sweet. It's really heartwarming, and it's an interesting look into her past and relationships that aren't just romantic.
God smiles on my little brother inside and out. He's better than most.
Peace. If there's a man like me, his birch ain't my tree.
Birch is a killer track. Destina's piano leads the song while Justin's vocals keep an energy to it, and Taylor with the backing vocals doesn't really feel like it's underutilized. I think it just keeps up the folklore sound with Bon Iver, Aaron, and Taylor, and that's why I like it so much.
Legends in your lips, even if it's a false god.
False God has a better 80s vibe than most of 1989, and it's just a pretty track that is both vibey and chill.
And even though you want to, just try to never grow up.
Never Grow Up is a somber track about holding on to childhood innocence, clearly coming from a perspective of someone who, at a very young age, was forced to grow up quick. It's pretty sad.
This time, I'm telling you, we are never, ever, ever getting back together.
Yeah, it's cheesy and overplayed, but it has such an angst to it that I find really fun and explosive. And it's cool to compare it to All Too Well, considering they're both about the same person.
All I can say is I was enchanted to meet you.
Enchanted has range with its beautiful intro and its heavy rock chorus and verses which balance the two out. It's a really beautiful and nice track.
Would it be enough if I could never give you peace?
Peace is a pleasant song about how, after a relationship ends, you're still on good terms. You still love their family and care about them. You just know you can't be with them. It's a nice final track to Folklore, except it isn't, and I think it does the opposite of what Hoax does. It's a light-hearted examination of what happens after a relationship, compared to Hoax, which is the more depressing and dark side.
And you know that ever does is break and burn and end. But on a Wednesday in a cafe, I watched it begin again.
Begin Again is a cute track, but as the final song on Red, it is a bit underwhelming. Gold Rush is a more vibey track on Evermore, and it's just a fun time. Sure, it doesn't have the same substance as other songs on the album, but it has a strong feel to it that I still like. Dear John does something similar to the 10-minute version of All Too Well, as the 6-minute runtime allows Taylor to illustrate this relationship in detail, which makes the heartbreak even more engaging and emotional for the listener.
Your midnights, but I'll be cleaning up bottles with you on New Year's Day. Hold on.
New Year's Day is definitely the best track from Reputation, and it's not even close. It's a pretty track with a nice story, and back to the sound that Taylor is best at, not whatever the rest of Reputation was trying to be.
let me see your face. You wouldn't be the first renegade to need somebody.
Renegade reminds me a lot of Evermore. It has cool and quirky production and a pretty selfish story, which I think is the point. Evermore and Folklore were about presenting a flawed and human character in each song. It's pretty good as an Evermore bonus track. It's bizarre how despite being a Big Red Machine song, Justin is merely backing vocals. The pop version is also inferior to it, because the only difference is that that version is censored while this one isn't.
From the same little breaks in your soul, you know when it's time to go.
It's Time to Go is a great concept for a song, examining small vignettes of times when giving up is the only thing you really can do. And it's pretty sad and resonant, but also pretty powerful by not saying giving up is cowardly, but sometimes necessary. This is what Folklore and Evermore are about, telling truths of life in pop songs instead of just something to turn your brain off and listen to.
And you flash back to when he said forever and always.
This is the superior version compared to the original. It lets the song have a more accurate tone instead of the pop rock sound that really dilutes the themes of the original track.
And I never got past what you put me through, but it's wonderful to see that it never faced you. Hello, Mr. Perfectly Fine.
Mr. Perfectly Fine is one of Taylor's best breakup songs. There's so much spite and anger behind it, but there's still a sadness over what could have been that persists in the song. It reminds me of Olivia Rodrigo's Good For You.
Watch some name-dropping sleaze. Tell me what are my words worth. Take me to the lakes where all the poets went to die.
The Lakes is a bonus track for Folklore that is very poetic and grand. It has great melodies in both the verses and chorus that have a very interesting vibe to it that the rest of the album doesn't quite capture. Also, it has an interesting story of people obsessing over her when she just wants to be isolated and be able to make her music.
I want auroras and sad prose. Stop, you're losing me. Stop, you're losing me. I can't find a pulse, my heart won't start anymore.
I slept on You're Losing Me when it released. It has Midnight's production, but it changes throughout to keep it refreshing and has some pretty great writing. Sure, it's another somewhat simple breakup song, but it's executed very well.
I searched the party of better bodies just to learn that you never cared. You're on your own, kid. You always have been.
You're On Your Own Kid is a song I really adore that has really dull production. The acoustic version from the Eras Tour film made me love this song.
Riding in my room, I'm playing my songs in the parking lot. I'll run away.
Which I think, aside from the production, is perfect.
Riding in my room, I play colors for your portrait. Lay the table with the fancy shit and watch you tolerate it.
Tolerated is a really depressing track about being undervalued in a relationship, knowing you're worth so much more, but still trying to win over their respect and adoration because you believe you love them so much and that you need that from them.
You tolerate, and I realize the blame is on me, 'cause I knew you were trouble when you walked in.
I Knew You Were Trouble is the song that made me start to like Taylor. It's pretty good. You can call it dated with the dubstep sound, but I find it pretty charming.
And I'm so sick of them coming at me again. 'Cause if I was a man, then I'd be the man. I'd be the man.
Aside from some themes and other tracks she never really does touch on
The patriarchy.
in her music, except for On The Mat. And I think she does it super well, simply because it's a personal depiction of her experience with sexism. How people see her sleeping around and question if she earned her fame, and how neither would be questioned were she a man. It's really biting and works a lot better than stuff like Shake It Off, where she's too general when talking about the hatred against her. It's a pretty accurate track with great lyrics that also satirizes manosphere rhetoric pretty well.
A drug that only worked the first few hundred times. And that's the thing about illicit affairs and clandestine meetings and
Illicit Affairs has a great use of a metaphor of comparing love and infidelity to a drug, how the lying can become addictive and how regretful she is about it while still being infatuated. It's a great story, great lyrics and great themes. It's a great track.
and you wanna scream, don't call me. So pretty to think all along there was some invisible string.
I love the jovial tone of Invisible String. The theme of destined lovers through the potentially unintentional reference to the East Asian concept of the red string of fate really ties the track together. It's a more simple song, focusing on the beauty of this love in an uplifting and happy tone, but it's incredibly joyful and it's just nice.
You ate at my favorite spot for dinner. We did it, but I just can't prove it. No, nobody, no crime, but I ain't letting up until the day I die.
Nobody No Crime has a really heavy country vibe that tells this crazy story of infidelity, murder, conspiracy. It's a goofy track that doesn't really feel it due to Taylor giving it 110% and the production really having such a groove to it.
License when I was 15. I know that it's over. I don't need your closure.
Closure has an ironic title since the track is about not wanting closure, as it's spite over the ex trying to make up and make good with her and she's just completely done with him. It's almost a more nuanced, we are never ever getting back together. The production is also really quirky and fun, which adds to her attitude on the track.
Now you were my town. Now I'm in exile, seeing you out.
Exile is a duet track with The National, and I think it was a bold choice to start with his verse and chorus before Taylor even appears, to where it feels like she's the feature. That's probably my only gripe. You have their beautiful vocals duetting over this powerful extended metaphor of a lover being land you lose, which is a weird concept but they make it work. It's all led with this deep instrumental work. It's a brilliant track.
I'll stare directly at the sun, but never in the mirror. It must be exhausting, always rooting for the anti-hero.
Anti-Hero is one of those songs that I feel like it being overplayed does it a disservice. It has an interesting perspective of self-hatred from someone known for breakup songs, where Taylor feels worthless and like everyone is against her. It's a pretty powerful track, but also a fun pop song.
Pierced through the heart, but never killed. This is a state of grace.
State of Grace is such a great track. It introduces us to Red so well, while also just being a really good song by itself. It also shows us how much Taylor has improved on her craft, even from Speak Now.
And I can see us twisted in bed sheets. I get sipped away like a bottle of wine.
August is definitely a fan favorite for a reason. The production here is incredible even for folklore, and the perspective of Augustine in the relationship, one where her name is never said on the whole album, where she plays a role of nothing but a love-starved third wheel and an obstacle between James and Betty, is really intriguing. It's a very unique and gorgeous track.
It's in my dreamland, my house of stone, your ivy grows.
Ivy is a lovely song about a pretty bad person, but I think it's balanced out with not really glorifying the infidelity and it more so being a critique of that attitude, while still highlighting that the protagonist is human and they regret that they've fallen in love with someone else. It's a nuanced look at a relationship that Taylor has previously sung about pretty nonchalantly.
You seem angry, you're getting more angry. And there's nothing like a mad woman. What a shame she went bad.
Mad Woman is a song that satirizes the idea that women being outspoken and independent are getting out of their place or inconvenient. It's not the first song with the message, but it's probably Taylor's one that does it the best.
Find something to wrap your noose around. It only feels this raw right now, lost in the labyrinth of my mind.
Labyrinth is a really subtle track with production that I love. It's so heavy and uncanny, and it matches the delicate vocal performance from Taylor. It's my favourite song from Midnights.
Should have kept every grocery store receipt, 'cause every scrap of you would be taken from me. Watched as you signed your name, Marjorie, all your closets of backlog dreams, and how you left them all to me.
Marjorie is a heartbreaking song about Taylor's grandmother, which tells a story of grief, particularly about denial of the passing of a loved one, hoarding everything that reminds you of them as to not lose them, to imagine having conversations with them to keep them alive. It's horrifically intimate and personal, that almost makes me uncomfortable, but it's still a gorgeous song.
Got to say your name. I'm on a bench in Coney Island, wondering where did my baby go.
Coney Island is a beautiful track, telling the story of losing a loved one over a long period of time, to where nostalgia for the old time is paired with that love, and that the protagonist feels trapped in the past somehow. It makes them fall blind to how the relationship is falling apart, eventually ending up sitting by themselves in a relic of that nostalgia, wondering why their lover isn't there anymore. It's really poignant, and as a duet track it works really well.
Name goes up in lights. You wonder if you'll make it out alive. And they'll tell you now you're the lucky one.
The Lucky One is one of Taylor's most introspective tracks. It's a look at how the music industry takes passionate artists, chews them up and spits them out. She examines herself following a long line of other unfortunate artists and how perspectives change, particularly the character of the Lucky One, changing from the girl who makes it big to the one who quits while she's ahead and lives a humble and safe life. It's definitely one of her best and most astounding tracks.
I had a feeling so peculiar. This pain wouldn't be forevermore.
Evermore is a perfect duet, discussing regret and dissatisfaction over the ending of a relationship, which feels like a pain that'll never end after a breakup, and how it leads to self-destructive behaviour, both physical and emotional. Exile and Coney Island are also great duet tracks, but Justin Vernon's performance titled Taylor's Here, specifically, just blends so well together.
Thought some miracle would see us through. But what if the miracle was even getting one moment with you?
Ronan is such a strange track, as it doesn't feel like something that belongs on an album known for 22, We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, and I Knew You Were Trouble. But it also does fit alongside tracks like All Too Well and The Lucky One. It's a genuinely heartbreaking track about having and loving a child, only for them to die extremely young, and Taylor describing the memories and grief caused by that death. It's so vivid and emotionally impactful.
Betty, I know where it all went wrong. Your favorite song was playing from.
Betty is the final track from Folklore, which is part of the love triangle, and I think it's the best as part of that narrative. I think it's such a relief considering what song is directly before it, with a more country pop track that harkens back to her origins, but also not sounding too different from the folk of the rest of Folklore. Not only is it fun and playful, but also has some hard-hitting lines that I resonate with greatly. Sure, it's not some heady, deep track, but it's fun, narratively succinct, and a good end to the narrative on the album.
Was what I did to you. Me too. And we still want me when I'm nothing new.
Nothing New is a vault track that almost triumphs every other song on Red. But it's from an album that has so many heavy hitters that it still has big competition. It's similar to The Lucky One, but a more self-conscious personal examination of how long one's novelty will last as an artist before the studio, and even more so the audience, will disregard them in favour of a newer, younger artist. Add on a beautiful Phoebe Bridgers feature and obviously you get one of her best tracks.
Time, leave it all behind, and there is happiness.
Happiness is a beautifully brutal song that tackles a breakup in such a delicate and detailed way that it shines beyond Taylor's other breakup tracks. It's bittersweet with her wanting to reminisce about all the happy times despite the outcome, and also her fighting with her own bitterness over the new her. The character she portrays is so detailed and specific despite her only existing for the 5 minutes that the song lasts. It's great.
Sorry, I can't see facts through all of my fury. And when I felt like I was an old cardigan under someone's bed.
Cardigan was the first song of Taylor's where I was like, oh yeah, she's good. I liked plenty of her previous songs, but there's just something about Cardigan that shows how so much bigger of an artist she is than just broken heart sad country song girl. It works as one of those songs, sure, but it's part of the story that goes throughout the whole album, and I think both interpretations of the song are valid and don't take anything from the enjoyability of it. It's just so poetic and well written, with great production and performance from Taylor. It's a masterful track.
Cause I dropped your hand while dancing, left you out there standing, crestfallen on the land in champagne problems.
Champagne Problems definitely mirrors Cardigan, at least in my eyes, but I think it's ever so slightly better. While Cardigan works as both a narrative track and a normal heartbreak track, Champagne Problems tells an engaging story that you uncover as it goes along, realizing that it's about a woman who breaks up with her partner as he proposes to her. It's a hard track to explain, you just kinda have to listen to it. And if you've made it this far and haven't heard it, I don't know how you did, but you should definitely give it a listen. If you're the kind of person who avoids Taylor because she's generic and boring, then just don't imagine Taylor singing the song and you will definitely like it. I mean, what is there to say? All Too Well, 10-minute version is an expansive track that never feels its length. It tells a story that is perfectly paced that leads us through this entire relationship as animosity begins to grow between the couple. And where the original version is a pretty broad heartbreak song, the 10-minute length allows the added time to make it so much more personal and specific to where it's a story being told, not just a song to sing along to. It becomes genuinely painful to see this one-sided relationship spiral into hatred, delivered with such pain, but also levity from Taylor. It makes it one of her best songs. But it's not quite her best. My favourite songs are those that are able to elicit a powerful emotional response, especially when I wasn't expecting anything like it. Tracks that personally move me beyond what I thought music was capable of doing. Epiphany is one of those songs. This brutal track, crafted through soft vocals and delicate production, gives you the feeling of walking through the woods in the early morning. The story being told is vivid and painful, shifting from Taylor touching on the experience and trauma of war from the perspective of her grandfather, to doctors during the COVID pandemic going through similar experiences of being powerless to save someone despite it being their entire purpose. This hopelessness is expressed through how Taylor delivers some lines, particularly about soldiers having nothing but a rifle to fight against death, and about how doctors watch someone's mother, immortal beings, die before their eyes. Where Taylor seemingly can't hold in the whisper she's been singing and yells for the only time in the track. The song ends on a chilling note, with Taylor finally explaining the title's meaning. This epiphany is not real. It's merely what the mind is conjuring to make sense of all the trauma experienced, to make the mind comfortable before dying. It's a song that shatters me and makes me tear up each time. When I first listened to Tim McGraw, I never expected that Taylor would make such a subtle, emotive and surreal track, contemplating death and the experiences on the front line, both for soldiers and healthcare workers, and what they go through under the intention of saving lives and potentially ruining their own forever. Epiphany is my favourite Taylor Swift song. It might be one of my favourite songs. So that's it. All 237 songs that I chose to rank. This has been a long time in the works, and I'm glad I've finally decided what Taylor's best song is. Unequivocally, factually, scientifically, you cannot deny this. This is the only true answer. This was fun. It was good to listen to an artist, all the work they've done, hearing how they've changed over time, being able to just think about this artist that people often just see as pretty simplistic, and seeing her range and her abilities. As someone who never actively listened to Taylor's music prior to last year, I implore anyone who hasn't listened to or thinks that Taylor isn't for them, and just give her a listen. She has so many different types of songs, I'm sure there will be one that you will like. And to Swifties, I hope that my opinions don't hurt you that much. Thanks for watching.